There is a distinct haunting beauty in the way we look back at the twilight of the 20th century, an era when the bright lights of Hollywood frequently cast long, melancholic shadows over the gritty realities of American life. In the late 1970s, the entertainment landscape was shifting, caught between the polished illusion of studio glamour and a raw, New York-driven hunger for truth. It was during this golden age of television that a seemingly simple project emerged, masquerading as mere late-night entertainment, but operating as something far more profound. It was a chronicle of a city that never sleeps, captured within the greasy, oil-stained confines of a cramped garage where the neon glow outside flickered against the worn faces of people chasing just one more desperate chance. This was a world where dreams did not necessarily die, but were instead quietly parked between exhausting shifts, waiting for a breakthrough that might never arrive. Looking back from the vantage point of 2026, the passing of decades has only magnified the bittersweet brilliance of this ensemble, transforming what began as a sharp comedy into a deeply emotional archive of human endurance, heartbreak, and forgotten idols. At the center of this bustling, chaotic universe stood a collection of souls whose behind-the-scenes stories hit harder the older we get. There was the quiet anchor of the entire operation, a man from the Bronx with tired eyes and a steady, grounded voice, who managed reality while everyone else chased illusions. He became the moral compass for a room full of dreamers and fragile hearts, masking his own quiet regrets beneath a layer of deep empathy. Nearby, operating from a literal cage, was a comic monster of pure ego, barking orders and weaponizing cruelty to hide an agonizing fear of being left behind and ignored by the world. The brilliance of the production lay in these stark contrasts, balancing the loud, desperate bravado of the spotlight with the silent, aching vulnerabilities of ordinary existence. Yet, the true mystique of this legendary gathering extended into the realm of the surreal and the tragic. Among the grease-stained crew was a wide-eyed, innocent outsider whose broken language and unpredictable, nervous giggles blurred the very lines between performance and reality, guided by an eccentric genius whose time on this earth would be cut devastatingly short. Beside him wandered a spectacular ghost of the 60s, a burned-out soul surviving on flashes of startling wisdom and chaotic energy that would eventually rocket into the stratosphere of cinema history. And then there was the handsome youth, fresh off a cinematic phenomenon, who used swagger as an armor against rejection, completely unaware of the heartbreaking real-life struggles with addiction and health that awaited him in the shadows of the Hollywood hills. These figures did not just play characters. They lived an extraordinary chapter of cultural history that continues to echo with nostalgia, glamour, and hidden drama. As the television cameras first began to roll, in the autumn of 1978, the air inside the Paramount Studios was thick with an electric anticipation that could only exist at the intersection of a dying studio system and a new era of character-driven storytelling. The network executives knew they had captured something unique, yet few could have predicted how the unvarnished poetry of the Sunshine Cab Company would permanently alter the cultural landscape. The transition from the written page to the physical set required an intricate dance between the actors' real-world origins and the fictional desolation of their characters. It was a golden age of creative freedom, where the behind-the-scenes dynamics were just as intensely layered as the half-hour stories broadcast weekly into millions of American living rooms. The physical facade of the garage was constructed with meticulous precision, featuring oil-stained concrete floors and flickering fluorescent lights that cast a pale, compromising glow on the faces of the cast. This deliberate realism created a hyper-authentic stage where these future icons began their collective ascent to fame. Completely unaware of how navigating the maze of sudden stardom would soon collide with the hidden pressures and unspoken anxieties of the Hollywood industry. At 43 years old, Judd Hirsch brought the hardened, weary authenticity of his Bronx upbringing straight into the heart of this fictional universe, establishing himself as the undeniable anchor of the entire narrative. Born in March of 1935, Hirsch possessed a profound artistic maturity and a commanding theatrical background that allowed him to infuse the character of Alex Riger with a quiet, palpable exhaustion that simply could not be faked. Behind the scenes, he naturally assumed the very role he portrayed on screen, acting as a respected mentor and a grounding force for a younger cast navigating the treacherous labyrinth of overnight celebrity. Directly contrasting his steady, dignified presence was the volcanic, brilliant energy of Danny DeVito. At 34 years old, the Neptune Township, New Jersey native stepped into the infamous Dispatcher's cage as Louis De Palma, immediately transforming what could have been a flat comic villain into a multi-dimensional masterclass of psychological depth. The constant friction between Ryger's moral composure and De Palma's tyrannical, insecure barking from behind his wire mesh window became the primary engine driving the series forward. Yet, away from the blinding spotlights of the studio floor, DeVito was already quietly laying the foundational bricks of an enduring Hollywood empire, carefully balancing the harsh nature of his legendary character with a sharp, calculating cinematic intellect that would eventually elevate him to the status of a powerhouse director and producer. The vibrant youth and raw physical charisma of The Garage were carried on the capable shoulders of two young men whose real lives mirrored their on-screen pursuits in hauntingly pressy ways. Tony Danza, a 27-year-old Brooklyn native born in 1951, brought a genuine background in professional boxing to the character of Tony Banta, creating an underdog boxer whose emotional bravery completely eclipsed his losing record in the ring. Danza's charm lay in his unvarnished New York energy, translating the stamina of a real fighter into the unforgiving arena of network television, creating an instantly lovable figure who absorbed life's relentless beatings with a goofy, unbreakable optimism. In stark contrast stood Jeff Conaway, who at 28 entered the production riding the monumental wave of global glamour following his breakout role as Kenickie in Grease. Conaway's character, Bobby Wheeler, was the ultimate embodiment of the Hollywood actor's grind, a handsome, desperate dreamer constantly hustling through auditions while using a carefully curated swagger as a protective shield against the humiliating sting of rejection. Behind the glitz and the immediate critical triumphs of those golden years, however, the real-world pressures were quietly beginning to accumulate. The tragic irony of Conaway's journey was that while his character fought to maintain dignity on the screen, the actor himself was beginning to navigate the grueling demands of an industry that historically consumed its most fragile talents, setting the stage for profound personal battles that would later darken his most promising chapters. Amidst this heavy landscape of masculine bravado, desperate dreams, and locker room banter, a vibrant, stabilizing force emerged to completely redefine the depiction of working-class women on television. Marilu Henner, just 26 years old when the show debuted in 1978, infused the character of Elaine Nardo with a brilliant intelligence and a grounded competence that completely shattered the standard, decorative sitcom archetypes of the era. Elaine was a single mother juggling the exhausting reality of taxi shifts with a burning ambition to break into the elite art world, proving every single night that she could easily hold her own against the toxic environment of the Dispatcher's cage without ever sacrificing her inherent warmth or emotional vulnerability. Henner's off-screen persona perfectly matched this sharp independence, allowing her to trade rapid-fire, honest dialogue with Hirsch and effortlessly deflect the sleazy machinations of DeVito's character. In those formative early episodes, she was flanked by Randall Carver as John Burns, a 32-year-old Texan whose earnest demeanor represented the ultimate, wide-eyed innocence of a newcomer before the relentless grind of the metropolis could harden his spirit. Although Carver's journey with the ensemble would ultimately be confined to the foundational first season, his character's gentle mark left a crucial emotion mark for Soak, highlighting the pure nature of hope before it is tested by the realities of survival, the true, volatile genius that pushed the production past the boundaries of traditional television and into the realm of legendary art came from two eccentric masters who routinely defied every conventional rule of Hollywood storytelling. Andy Kaufman, a 29-year-old cult performer, treated the mechanic Latka Gravas not as a typical comedic character, but as a daring piece of live performance art. Kaufman's absolute refusal to conform to standard sitcom formulas created a highly charged, fascinatingly tense atmosphere behind the scenes, as he constantly blurred the delicate lines between reality and illusion, forcing his fellow actors to operate in a state of perpetual improvisation. His brilliant, childlike innocence on camera, characterized by an invented language and nervous giggles, masked a deeply complex artistic philosophy that frequently bewildered network executives while utterly captivating millions of viewers. Into this brilliant madness stepped Christopher Lloyd at 40 years old, a towering theatre actor whose performance was originally intended to be a single guest appearance. The immediate impact of his spaced-out stare, tangled hair, and the legendary comedic timing of Reverend Jim Ignatowski's driver's license exam made him an instant, indispensable pillar of the entire series. Lloyd played Jim with a fearless physical comedy, presenting him as the beautiful, tragic fallout of the 1960s counterculture dream. A man who had seen too much, yet could suddenly snap from blank confusion to drop flashes of startling wisdom that left audiences completely spellbound. Behind the glittering facade of award nominations and soaring television ratings, the atmosphere within the production began to shift into a much more complex and emotionally charged territory as the decade turned. The initial euphoria of overnight success gradually gave way to the exhausting high-stakes reality of maintaining a weekly masterpiece under the relentless gaze of the Hollywood studio system. Behind closed doors, the pristine illusion of a unified, harmonious ensemble began to fracture under the weight of immense personal struggles and creative clashes that the network desperately tried to conceal from the public eye. It was during this intense period of transition that the true human drama of the cast began to mirror the bittersweet melancholy of the characters they portrayed, transforming the soundstage into a pressure cooker where the lines between the actors' private agonies and their public persona became hauntingly blurred. The glitz of industry, parties, and the adoration of millions could no longer mask the growing tension, as certain stars found themselves caught in a downward spiral that would permanently alter the trajectory of their lives and leave an indelible mark on the history of the medium. The most heartbreaking and fiercely guarded secret of the production revolved around the tragic, accelerating decline of Jeff Conaway, whose portrayal of the dashing Bobby Wheeler was increasingly compromised by a devastating real-world battle. Conaway, who had entered the series with the radiant, untouchable aura of a global superstar fresh from the triumph of Greece, possessed a fragile sensitivity that was easily bruised by the brutal, competitive nature of the industry. As the seasons progressed, an insidious dependence on substances began to take a heavy toll on his physical presence and professional reliability, causing immense anxiety among the producers and his fellow cast members. The network, terrified of tarnishing the show's wholesome commercial appeal, went to great lengths to manage the situation, quietly restructuring scripts and reducing his screen time to accommodate his erratic behavior. Yet, the painful truth could not be contained forever, and after 3 seasons of intense internal struggle and mounting behind-the-scenes complications, Conaway made the agonizing decision to leave the series. His departure was a sober, unspoken turning point for the entire cast, a vivid and distressing reminder of how the relentless pressures of Hollywood glamour could slowly erode even the brightest and most promising young talents, leaving his character's unfinished dreams forever suspended in the amber of television history. Simultaneously, the erratic, boundary-pushing genius of Andy Kaufman was creating an entirely different kind of storm behind the scenes, pushing the patience of the studio executives to its absolute limit. Kaufman did not merely view his role as a standard acting assignment, he weaponized his performance as Latka Gravus to challenge the very nature of network television, frequently engaging in psychological warfare with the writers and producers. The tension reached an explosive peak when Kaufman demanded that his notoriously abrasive fictional alter ego, an obnoxious lounge singer named Tony Clifton, be officially hired by the studio and given his own separate contract. This bizarre, immersive piece of performance art resulted in absolute chaos on the set, culminating in a legendary, highly publicized shouting match where security guards had to physically escort the disruptive Clifton character off the Paramount lot. While the public viewed these incidents as brilliant marketing stunts or eccentric pranks, the reality behind closed doors was one of immense frustration and profound alienation. as the cast struggled to maintain professional stability amidst Kaufman's constant disruptions. Yet, beneath this exhausting theatrical rebellion lay a deeply private and fragile human being, whose unconventional path would be cut short just a few years later by a devastating terminal illness, casting a profound, retroactively tragic light over his final chaotic seasons in the garage, in an effort to stabilize the volatile creative energy of the series and inject a fresh, dynamic perspective into the narrative. The producers made the brilliant decision to introduce Carol Kane into the ensemble in 1980. Arriving at the age of 28, the exceptionally talented Cleveland, Ohio native brought a fierce, uncompromising whirlwind of eccentric energy as Simca Gravas, the passionate, sharp-tongued counterweight to Latka's meek demeanor. Kane's inclusion was a masterstroke of casting, providing a sophisticated intellectual and comedic match for Kaufman that forced him to ground his surreal performance in a genuine, deeply felt human relationship. Behind the scenes, Kane's arrival breathed new life into the production. Her masterful command of timing and profound emotional depth immediately commanding the absolute respect of her peers and the industry alike, resulting in prestigious Emmy accolades. Her character boldly challenged the entrenched masculine dynamics of the garage, proving that even within the strict confines of a traditional network format, a fiercely independent and deeply unconventional woman could redefine the emotional stakes of a primetime series, transforming a bizarre cultural clash into one of the most tender, grown-up romances ever broadcast. As the underlying drama of the series deepened, the writers began to deliberately peel back the protective layers of its most formidable characters, introducing powerful female forces that exposed the raw, vulnerable nerve endings hidden beneath the comedic facade. Rhea Perlman stepped into this gritty world as Zena Sherman, a cafeteria worker who, against all conventional logic, developed a volatile, deeply complicated romance with Danny DeVito's tyrannical Louis De Palma. Perlman brought a sharp, unyielding wit and a profound sense of personal dignity to the role, creating a character who refused to be intimidated by De Palma's explosive bluster. Their on-screen dynamic was charged with a brilliant underlying tension that forced the audience to witness the agonizing insecurity and profound loneliness that drove Louis' cruelty, effectively humanizing a character who had threatened to become a caricature. This intricate exploration of hidden pain was further amplified by the arrival of Louise Lasser as Phyllis Bornestein Consuelos, the ex-wife of Judd Hirsch's Alex Riger. Lasser, performing with a fragile, heartbreaking complexity, brought the heavy ghost of a shattered marriage directly into the garage, forcing Alex to confront the profound grief of his unfulfilled life. These raw, emotionally naked confrontations shifted the entire temperature of the series, revealing to millions of viewers that the true essence of the show lay not in its laughter, but in the quiet, collective endurance of ordinary people surviving the wreckage of their own fractured dreams. The passage of time transforms television into history, and history into a breathtaking gallery of forgotten idols and enduring legends. As the decades have quietly slipped past the grease-stained doors of the Sunshine Cab Company, the true scale of its magnificent legacy has become fully visible, not just through its central icons, but through a rich constellation of remarkable supporting talents who drifted through those flickering garage lights, leaving indelible traces of human truth. Among these monumental figures was the legendary Jack Gilford, who stepped onto the soundstage in his early 70s to portray Joe Riger, the stubborn yet fiercely loving father of Alex. Gilford, born in the summer of 1908, was a revered master of the old-world theatrical tradition, a man whose real-life career had beautifully weathered the turbulent, changing storms of 20th-century American entertainment. When he brought his profound humanity and gentle humor to the screen, he did not merely deliver a guest performance. He provided a crucial window into the heavy generational weight, unspoken guilt, and unfulfilled expectations that shaped the very soul of the main character. Gilford's final years before his passing in June of 1990 from stomach cancer at the age of 81 were a quiet testament to a lifetime of artistic dedication, leaving behind a legacy that earned him a prestigious Tony nomination and a permanent place in history. As a master of the poignant, unforgettable character arc, this exquisite emotional depth was further enriched by a distinct group of formidable women who refused to let the gritty, masculine energy of the garage diminish their unique brilliance or compromise their dignity. Andrea Marcovicci glided into the series in her early 30s as Emily, bringing a rare, highly refined elegance that felt like classical music walking directly into a room filled with beautiful noise. A celebrated cabaret singer and artist in her own right, Marcovicci infused her scenes with a poetic, sophisticated romanticism that allowed the characters, if only for a brief moment, to imagine a reality far beyond the constraints of their late-night meters, proving that true artistry refuses to go out of style. Alongside her stood Susan Kellerman as Greta Gravas, a commanding, non-nonsense force from the old country who weaponized brilliant deadpan timing to challenge the American chaos unfolding around her. Kellerman's imposing presence and long-respected career as a scene-stealing character actress demonstrated that a powerful woman could command the screen in a limited moment and leave a permanent dent in a sprawling narrative. This tradition of uncompromising female realism was beautifully echoed by Anne DeSalvo as Vicky DeStefano, who injected a sharp jolt of authentic Philadelphia toughness into the life of Tony Banta, treating love not as a convenient, cute sitcom reward, but as grueling, necessary adult work. Even the younger generation left an echo, as a 19-year-old Talia Balsam portrayed Kathy Consuelos, offering a grounded glimpse into the intersecting lives of a massive metropolis, a brief but meaningful milestone that launched Balsam into a highly respected, decades-long career portraying complex, independent women with quiet authority across the changing landscape of American cinema. The absolute authenticity of this world was cemented by faces that felt instantly familiar to audiences. Individuals who embodied the very definition of Hollywood stamina and working-class grit. Dick Miller, the quintessential character actor, born in the Bronx in December of 1928, arrived at the age of 51 to portray Ernie. Miller was a beloved cult favorite, a man whose world-weary energy and unmistakable visage had graced countless cinematic masterpieces, representing the ultimate survivor in an industry notorious for discarding its veterans. His passing in January of 2019 at the age of 90 marked the end of an extraordinary era, yet his brief time in the garage remains a shining example of how a master craftsman can turn a minor appearance into a profound statement on human resilience. This gritty realism was beautifully balanced by the fleeting innocence of youth, brought to life by 11-year-old David Mendenhall as Jason. Mendenhall's presence beautifully reframed the hardened, exhausted adults around him, shifting the emotional temperature of the entire series and forcing these weary dreamers to see their own complicated lives through the unblemished, vulnerable eyes of a child. A brilliant narrative choice that demonstrated the show's unique ability to uncover profound weight within the mundane routines of a New York night. As we observe this magnificent cultural archive from the definitive vantage point of 22/6, the final acts of those brilliant minds we lost too soon take on an almost unbearable weight of nostalgia and melancholy. The devastating loss of Andy Kaufman in May of 1984, at the tragically young age of 35, from lung cancer, sent shockwaves through the entertainment world, leaving behind an unfinished canvas of avant-garde genius that continues to mystify, challenge, and inspire generations of modern performers. Kaufman's absolute refusal to conform to traditional rules preserved his performance as Latka in a state of perpetual pristine innocence, a stark contrast to the grueling earthly departure of Jeff Conaway in 2011. Conaway's passing at the age of 60 from the agonizing complications of pneumonia and sepsis was a deeply painful Hollywood tragedy, a sobering, real-life reminder of the fragile armor of swagger and the hidden, devastating costs of fame that his character Bobby Wheeler so beautifully portrayed on screen. These tragic losses form the dark, poignant undercurrent of a series that routinely laughed to keep from crying, anchoring its comedic brilliance in the genuine, unvarnished tragedies of human existence. Yet, the remarkable survival of the remaining icons into the year 22/6 stands as a triumphant monument to artistic endurance and the timeless power of storytelling. At 91 years old, Judd Hirsch remains the magnificent, grounded soul of that bygone era, his portrayal of Alex Riger aging with a profound dignity, representing the part of adulthood that society so rarely glamorizes, but everyone eventually meets. Beside him, the 81-year-old Danny DeVito stands as an undisputed titan of modern entertainment, having stacked eras of film stardom and producer power to prove that his ferocious, brilliant presence could outlast any genre or trend. Christopher Lloyd, now 87, continues to cast his long, eccentric shadow across pop culture. His legendary journey from the chaotic, beautiful dust of Reverend Jim to the cinematic immortality of Doc Brown, marking him as a true master of the unconventional. Together with the enduring grace of Tony Danza at 75, Marilu Henner at 74, and Carol Kane at 74, these living legends carry the torch of a golden age, proving that while the neon lights of the Sunshine Cab Company may have dimmed, the brilliant mark they left on history is entirely permanent. A beautiful late-night confession that will continue to echo as long as there are dreamers waiting for their shift to end. News banner. Bricking Report: The Untold Destinies of the Tacky Cast from 1978 to 2026.